to episode 266 of the Various Asunder podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio, beautiful campus of Grace College and Grace Theological Seminary, by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who just left a meeting picking up an extra week's worth of work.
Oh, yeah.
John Scott Sloat.
Doc, what's going on?
Well, we are recording on a balmy February afternoon.
Yeah, I walked across I have a sport coat on, but no other coat.
I think this is the same one you wore last week when we recorded, and there was debate between us. Gray or brown?
Oh, yeah. What do you see this week?
I
I have like 5 of these, right,
Yeah.
that I just sort of rotate through.
Sure.
But
yeah, I still see more dominant gray tones, but
Really?
there's definitely brown in there, for sure.
really,
For sure.
yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, John, it's kind of what you signed up for, being a vice president, to go into a meeting and walk out with an extra week's worth of work.
Oh, yeah.
But it could be quite
It
beneficial.
could be lucrative. Yeah,
Quite beneficial to
Yeah.
the institution. Yeah.
possibly. We will see. We will see.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hint and innuendo this to death, but
Nope.
could be a big deal.
Big bucks. Okay. If you would like to contact the show and explain to John Sloat how you'd like to give to the institution.
Please do. You can email my private email if you want to do that. Find it on the website.
You can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. And let's be honest, you can find John's personal email at Grace pretty easily.
It's on the website.
Yeah.
Marketers find it all the time.
I bet. I think we're still on Facebook, maybe on YouTube. Who knows?
We know you can give a 5-star review, though.
We know that you can leave a 5-star rating on whatever platform you access the show. We do know that. Yeah.
Hit us up.
All right. So let's talk a little sports. This is the dead weekend between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl.
And no baseball to sort of by the time the Super Bowl happens, we're right at spring training, right? And baseball games are starting.
Pitchers and catchers report yet, though?
Normally around Valentine's Day.
Okay. So it's still a little early.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So we're still, I guess, a week and a half, 2 weeks away from that.
Okay.
But yeah, we're kind of Sunday, got that itch. Started thinking what do I even watch?
Yeah.
And there's NBA, of course.
Yeah.
I like playoff NBA though more than I like regular season.
Yes. I'll watch college basketball over NBA.
Yeah, that's probably true. What do you make of Auburn? They're pretty good.
They're impressive.
Do you think they got the stuff to go all the way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
What do you make of UConn being 25 after winning the Natty?
I don't know. I mean, I'm more interested in the fact that their coach Dan Hurley is a bit of a basket case.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I think if there's anybody who has embraced a sense of entitlement, it's him. I mean, he's been caught yelling at officials basically things like, don't you know who I am? Or I'm the best bleeping coach in America. You can't make that kind of call against me or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
And you start saying that kind of things, those kind of things.
Without being tongue-in-cheek.
Right.
Because if you say that tongue-in-cheek, it's funny, right?
Exactly.
Like when we say on here, don't you know who I am?
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. But
well, let's talk a little NBA because there was a Blockbuster trade over the weekend.
and a weird trade.
Very strange.
In fact, Twitter didn't believe it initially.
Yeah.
They were doubtful that this was real. And then when it got reported by ESPN and some other outlets, everyone was that's just strange.
Yeah. You had people checking the calendar. Wait a minute. This is not April Fool's Day?
Yeah.
I mean, we've still got 2 months to go before we get there.
So what was the trade? What was the
Well,
broad...
the big pieces are that the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. And there are other smaller pieces to that, but that's the big headline there.
Anthony Davis,
32 years old.
and has had is he on a downward slope a little bit in his career?
Well, and he's very injury prone.
Yeah.
I mean, you can count on him missing 15 to 20 games at minimum every year.
Was he not getting along with LeBron?
I don't think it had anything to do with that. I think it's the Lakers' way of trying to bring in a younger superstar.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it had less to do with AD than it was we need a young superstar in here.
And why would the Mavericks do this? I suppose that's the big question.
It is.
Was he – because Kyrie's still on that team, right?
Kyrie and Klay Thompson. So that was their big three, which is a pretty decent big three.
Right. They had not had a good season, though.
No, but there's been some injuries there.
Okay.
Did you go down the rabbit hole at all on Twitter to see some of the theories on this?
So I had read that the Mavs only talked to the Lakers or maybe one other team.
That's my understanding. Yes.
And didn't shop Luka.
Correct.
Which is just odd.
Which makes it look suspicious for sure.
Yeah, and I read something, and maybe this is what you're alluding to, that Mark Cuban's getting ready to sell, or has sold. Has he sold the Mavericks yet?
That's not what I'm referring
to. Okay, and that he was like clearing the deck before he left, or something like that. I don't know.
Who knows?
I know they had a funeral service outside of the Mavs stadium on Saturday or Sunday, which was like, it's very dramatic,
of
right?
Course.
But
yeah, I mean, So let me start with this. Luka was due to sign a max deal, the extension, the max deal.
Okay.
Which I think would have been something like $350 million.
That's a lot of money.
It's a ton of money. And, some people have pointed out, well, the Mavs weren't necessarily ready to go all in on him. They're concerned about his defense.
He's a little lazy on defense.
His conditioning. But the guy puts up 30 points a night, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. That doesn't grow on trees.
Right. There's not a lot of guys that do that in the NBA.
Especially someone who's 25.
Right.
I mean, realistically, you've got a minimum, you think, of another 5 years of him basically at his peak. 5 to 7 years probably, unless there's injuries, of course. But and you just never know. Like maybe someday he decides, okay, I'm going to go the LeBron route and I'm going to pay the millions of dollars to have the support staff around me for nutrition and massage therapists and all that sort of stuff. Who knows? Maybe not. But I've seen some people who have tied it to, and I don't know what to make of this. But apparently there is one of these sports gambling websites or groups. It's not one that it's not like FanDuel or DraftKings, one of the more like prominent ones.
Okay.
That wants to essentially create some sort of like casino experience at the stadium. And so they've been lobbying all these Texas legislators and that sort of thing, and they're getting nowhere.
Okay.
And so the theory is, well, if the Mavs are bad, then you need something to draw fans in.
Oh, and Mark Cuban wants to see that?
I don't know if it has anything to do with Mark Cuban, so I don't know.
Caveat. Yeah.
But anyway, it's just it is a head-scratching move because you could have shopped him around
and got a much better
deal. And so I think that
interesting. Huh.
I mean, and of course, there's all the
surely
there's all of the like, oh well, the league loves the fact that you put him in L.A., big market, but I mean
the Adam Silver conspiracy theory, yeah.
But Dallas is like the fourth or fifth biggest media market in the country. It's not like it's Milwaukee.
Yeah.
It's not like it's Oklahoma City.
It does always feel like if they'd have shopped him, he would have ended up in Brooklyn. Like it always feels like Brooklyn is gonna trade for a guy like that.
Is Brooklyn still owned by that Russian
I don't
oligarch?
think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But they continue to operate like they are. Do you remember when they had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving? I feel like
James Harden
in there. Yeah, and that.
But they only ended up playing like 15 games
Something
together
like
over
that.
like 3 years.
Something
because of
like that,
Injury
yeah.
and that sort of stuff. But I don't know. It's just weird. It's just a head scratcher that you're like, why would you not shop him around where you could get multiple first-round picks for him probably? And
Oh, yeah.
I don't
Well, now he can't sign a max deal, right?
Correct.
In L.A.? So
Correct.
So is he a free agent after this year?
That I don't know. I don't
Okay.
think so. My guess is there's some connection in there where they, already have in principle a sort of extension that they'll sign him to. That's not the max deal, but I don't know. Is there any real practical difference between $350 million and $320 million or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when you're already that wealthy, I'm not trying to say who cares about $30 million.
Sure.
But when you're that level of wealthy,
When you're at $300 million.
Yeah.
At
that's
30,
a 10%. That's a 10% difference.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe, but I don't know. Just weird. Just weird. How are your Knicks doing?
They lost to the Lakers like the day this trade happened. But before that, they had won 5 in a row. I think they're third or fourth in the East.
Third in the East, behind the Cavs and the Celtics.
And how far behind the Celtics are we? I don't think we're tremendously behind.
2.5 games.
So, yeah, I mean, we're having a very good season. OG Anunoby, I believe is how that's pronounced. I think I finally got that down. He came out of the Laker game with a foot injury. So we'll see how long that keeps him down. But they're Karl Anthony Towns has been a very good addition for us.
Man, the Knicks won that trade big time.
Yeah, big time. I can't actually believe the Timberwolves did that trade. And Mikal Bridges has been very, very good. Lengthy defender, but can shoot, can score. Jalen Brunson's been Jalen Brunson. I think he's solidified himself a little bit more as an NBA superstar this year, as well as Bodega Cat. I think Josh Hart is sort of the heart and soul of that team, playing shooting guard, but more of a defensive-minded shooting guard. Like he's more of a 10-12 rebound, 10-12 point kind of guy. He's been a lot of fun. So they've been a fun team to watch. I think they'll be good in the playoffs. I think the big knock on them is Tom Thibodeau places starters a lot.
Will they be worn down by the time they get to the playoffs?
Exactly. So I think that's the big question mark.
Yeah, I mean the NBA season is already so long, and you're playing 48-minute games. Did you see there was talk of shortening NBA games down to 40 minutes? Did you see this?
I did. I did see that.
Was that an Adam Silver idea, or is that just?
It feels like baseball does this all the time, where like the commissioner will float an idea to the press to see how people respond.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the same vibe with that.
Yeah, I don't think that's your answer in terms of – I mean, it's basically driven by our ratings are in the tank.
Yeah.
What do we do to fix this? I don't know that the issue is the games are too long.
Mm-hmm. Because it's over in 2 hours, right? I mean, it's a pretty quick –
2.5.
2.5?
Yeah.
So, I mean, football, they are engaged.
Well, NFL is what, 3 hours and 15 minutes-ish?
Yeah.
College is closer to 3.5.
Yeah, and so I don't know that it's game length that people struggle with.
Yeah.
I do think it's partly style of play.
I agree. I agree.
It's analytical, jack up threes,
Well, and I do think length of season plays into that, where it's like you're playing 82 regular season games. It's similar to it's half of what baseball is, but that's the problem with baseball too, right? Like, why do I care about this game? It's one of 162. Well, in the NBA, it's one of 82.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the cumulative effect is they certainly matter, but the fact that you notice the difference in intensity ratchet up significantly from, game 47 in the middle of, say, February compared to, mid-April when it's the opening round of the playoffs, and suddenly it's like now they're actually playing like their lives depend on it.
I also – and I'd be curious what you think about this. I also started rolling my eyes when reports started coming out of like players drinking during halftime, and I went like, really? This is your job? You're going to drink on the job, and particularly when you have a physical job like that, you're going to be drinking or smoking something, or.
But in some ways, it's a throwback to the earliest days.
That's
of the
true.
NBA. I mean, you hear all these stories of big time players, even in like the 50s and 60s, going into the locker room and smoking a cigarette at halftime.
So the cigarette in the 50s doesn't bother me as much because that was just like it wasn't connected to health in the same way it is today. You know what I mean? Okay. Yeah, it just I think it would bother me today more. It does bother me today more. Like if a guy is smoking a cigarette at halftime, I'm like, it's a bad idea.
Well, it's not cigarettes that they're smoking at halftime.
I know, but let's
be honest. Weed is going to be the choice.
Yes.
The option there.
Yeah. So the cigarettes in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s don't bother. Like there's a famous photo of Keith Hernandez smoking a cigarette on the bench during a game.
Oh yeah.
The 80s, you're getting into the spot where like I think the health, the understanding of what this does to your health was sort of coming out, but. I mean, Keith Hernandez was such that I think I was okay with him smoking cigarettes instead of like doing cocaine, Yeah,
within the Mets organization, that kind of falls on the lower end of the scale.
That's right.
Of substance abuse issues there.
So yeah, I don't know. I think you have a big spectrum in the NBA. You have LeBron pouring $1 million into his body each offseason.
Yeah.
And you have a guy just going on pure talent, drinking a fifth during halftime or something.
Yeah. Well, and it's even funny. Like I don't know that it's. Let me say it like this: it's interesting to me that the two best international players in the league, Doncic and Jokic, neither of them are especially impressive physical specimens.
Yeah.
I mean. They don't look like they've spent time in the weight room.
Yeah.
A lot of these other guys, you're like, okay, that dude's just chiseled.
Yeah.
I mean, just like absolutely chiseled.
Jokic strikes a physical imposing figure.
Just because he's tall and thick.
Well, have you seen I've seen videos of him like railing people with his arms and stuff. I mean, he can.
But he's not, jacked or cut.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you don't look at him. I mean, you look at a guy like LeBron James, and you're like, my goodness, did like someone chiseled that muscular frame out of marble?
This is what Zeus would look like.
Yeah. But not so much with Jokic and Doncic.
No. I don't think there's a Greek god for that.
No. We're like 5 or 6 weeks away from March Madness?
Yeah, we got to do our bracket thing.
Yeah. Who won last year?
I have no idea. I'm sure we did the right thing and got them something.
Surely we did.
I'm 90% sure we did.
Okay, that's good. I share about that 90% percentage. Hopefully nobody's out there bitter like, I never got my book, Doc. Come on.
I'm pretty sure. I know we've done a few. I know I always invite the guys in my fantasy baseball group.
Yep.
To participate.
Yep. Some of my family participates in that.
Some of my family participates as well.
Yeah.
And then listeners.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, John, we should move on.
Sure.
To our main topic for the day. And I think last week at the end of the episode, I talked about the opportunity I had to teach on the subject of hospitality in the New Testament in our local church. And I decided let's talk about hospitality this week.
Yeah, let's double dip.
Let's be hospitable.
Yeah.
Okay. So, John, when you think of that term hospitality, what sort of imagery does that conjure up in your brain?
So, I don't think the image that is conjured up for me is the extent of it. Like, I think it's much broader than that. But I think about having people at your house for a meal. That's like the most natural thing I think about. I think it's probably, and I think it probably is, much broader than that. But that's the image that comes up.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Is that what comes up for you?
Yeah, primarily. I think that's what people start with when they think of the issue of hospitality. And I think, of course, that is a form of hospitality. But when you step back for a minute and think more broadly, I think hospitality in the most basic sense is welcoming the other, whether that's a stranger, which is what really in some ways a literal rendering of that Greek word would be in terms of welcoming the foreigner or the stranger. But it doesn't always have to be a stranger. It's just welcoming someone into your presence, and I think using what you have to make them feel welcome, received, and an opportunity for them to experience blessing in your presence.
Yeah, yeah. You and Kate have always done this well.
We tried.
Yeah, I mean, you had people live in your basement.
Yeah, I think what do we count? I think we're at like 14 now, 13 or 14.
I'm in that count, right?
You are.
Even though it was a short stint.
Yes. You are a special category. We've had, I think, let me think, at least 3 now of the I'm engaged, I need somewhere to live, so I'm not, living with my fiance in this sort of weird gap we have between like
rent and marriage.
And leases and mortgages and all that sort of stuff. So we've had at least 3 of you.
Okay.
3 of you now that are the sort of engagement holding tank.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys have a very nice sleep number bed in the basement that I think lots of people look at and go, wow, they really spent. And I think the actual story is you guys got yourself a sleep number, just didn't care for it.
Correct.
Which and that's the only time I've ever slept on a sleep number. So like playing with that, I don't know what my number is, but playing it up and down. But you did not care for it.
Big disappointment.
But yeah, and I mean, you guys, I know it was more than just me, but my experience was coming over to your house on Sundays when, I was first employed full-time at Grace and would eat lunch virtually every Sunday.
Yeah, I think so.
And then watch football, baseball, whatever in the basement afterward. And oftentimes look up and go, oh my goodness, it's like 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock or something. Or,
gosh, it's about time for us to leave for life group.
Yes.
Which we were in together at the time as well.
Luckily, most of the time it was right upstairs, so it was pretty easy to get to.
Yeah, for sure. So let's think a little bit about this from a biblical perspective. When you think about let's start in the Gospels.
Okay.
What are some ways that we see hospitality show up in the gospel accounts?
It's an interesting question because I most naturally think of times when Jesus was shown hospitality, if that makes sense. So I think of Zacchaeus, right?
Yeah,
inviting him over to his house and having
Jesus inviting himself over to Zacchaeus'
I suppose
house.
So some forced hospitality there.
Right.
Or Jesus goes to the house of tax collectors and is sitting with these people who are very other to him, right?
Yeah.
Or I think of the woman pouring perfume over his feet, right? Sharing what she has with him. So I think of those things naturally. What am I missing?
Well, it's interesting. The last passage you mentioned there, Luke 7, is actually a great picture of hospitality in the sense that so Simon, a Pharisee, has invited Jesus into his home. And when Jesus goes to rebuke Simon for his condemnation of this woman, it's interesting. He starts with actually condemning Simon for his lack of hospitality. He said, I came into your house and you didn't wash my feet. I came into your house, you didn't anoint my head with oil. Like these were basic, bare minimum kind of hospitality expectations in the first century world.
Yeah.
And I would suggest, I think they were not just
They were snubs.
oversights. They were entirely intentional snubs to put Jesus in his place. And so that's the contrast there. Is he saying, look, this woman has come in, and in contrast to your lack of hospitality, she's showing, in one sense, exuberant hospitality. And it's an expression of her love for me.
Yeah.
And the fact that you didn't show me even basic hospitality shows you have no love for me at all. And so I think that's a fascinating contrast in the life and ministry of Jesus there. One other thing that comes to mind in the Gospels is the the multiple times where Jesus sends his followers out on mission, and he is basically forcing them to trust that God will provide through the hospitality of others.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to send you out 2 by 2. You're going to go into all these villages, and whoever welcomes you into their home, go in. Stay with them.
It kind of reminds me, and this is probably, a while back I did a fair bit of reading on Martin Luther's understanding of vocation, right? And one of the things he says is like, and I'm going to butcher this, is like, the most common way that God provides for you is through the hospitality of others. And I've changed the language a little bit there, right? I don't think Martin Luther had the concept of hospitality in mind, but through others loving you is how God will ultimately love you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It kind of reminds me of that.
Well, and I think that knowing a little bit about first century culture helps you understand that I'm not suggesting that it didn't require them to trust God to go into these villages and expect and hope for someone to take them in. But hospitality in first century Israel would have been a cultural norm. It would have been an expectation. And it was such a valued thing that you could potentially have different families arguing with each other over who gets to host these honored guests. And it's funny, I actually experienced something similar to this when I was a student on a summer mission project in the country of Albania. So this is back in summer of '94. And I was leading a team of 5 other college students, and we were going into these villages unannounced to share the Jesus film as a way of sharing the gospel in these villages. And in some of these villages, they'd never even met an American before. So, and when you come to their village by helicopter, that tends to cause a little bit of a stir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unannounced, here are suddenly 4 Americans and 2 Albanians just coming off the helicopter. Like, that causes a bit of a stir.
Yeah. They kind of so much different. But I remember being at the U.S. Open golf, and all of a sudden a helicopter flies in and lands on the course, and we're just like, what on earth is going on? And somebody goes, oh, yeah, that's how Tiger Woods gets to the course.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody else drives in. Tiger takes a
So basically the
chopper.
same thing.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, sort of.
Yeah,
Different,
more or less.
different audiences.
More or less.
Yeah.
In any case, I remember.
You have been referred to as the Tiger Woods of commentary writing. So
By whom?
Myself just.
Okay. But I do remember in one particular village, we arrived, and this family offered to house us, which is great. And we go to their home, and they're showing us, okay, you guys are going to sleep in this room here, and they're pulling out this extra like bedding / mats kind of thing. and they're putting him on the porch. And they're like, and we're going to sleep out here. And I'm like, no. Come on. Like, we don't mind sleeping out on the porch.
Yeah.
It'll be a fun adventure for us. Like, please, we can't, it just, we don't want to kick you out of your own bedroom, essentially.
Yeah.
And so we go back and forth through translation, of course. And finally, this man says to us, you don't understand. If my village sees you guys
on the porch,
sleeping on my porch, I will be shamed because I am not welcoming you as I should. So please sleep inside. We'll sleep on the porch. Okay. I guess that's
fine.
Yeah. But, you know, that sort of American politeness of like, oh, no, don't trouble yourself. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. There's a greater cultural value here of hospitality that I can't be seen with guests sleeping on my porch. So anyway.
How was the bed?
It was adequate.
Okay.
I mean, look, when you're 19, you can sleep on anything.
You can sleep on anything.
Or
yeah.
20. I was 20, yeah. I mean.
So when I've traveled internationally and have slept in someone else's bed, I often find foreign beds are too short for me. Did you find this in Albania as well?
Well, in many cases, these were just essentially mats on the floor.
Okay, so it's like a yoga mat, thick yoga mat sort of thing?
Yeah, ish.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean.
When I've gone to Asia and somebody has had a bed for me, it's been like, oh, my head is pressed against the headboard and my feet are pressed against the footboard.
This bed was made for someone 5'8".
Yes.
So, anyway, I think that so I've been on the receiving end of that, and I think Jesus sending them out is, of course, expecting them to trust God. But there was enough of a cultural value where that was a reasonable thing to expect as well. I will also add that in those instructions, Jesus will sometimes say, when you enter a village, someone takes you in, stay there. Don't go house hopping. And I think that's in a statement of saying, look, don't go shopping around for the best option. You know, don't be like, oh, well, the Joneses housed us for a couple nights, but man, the Smiths have a palatial mansion they'd love to put us up in. Let's just hop over there.
We'll have a guest suite.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So in any case, so you see it in the Gospels. And really the general principle, I want to highlight this, is that Jesus specifically mentions this in Matthew 10:40 through 42, where he basically says, if you receive someone I send, you're receiving me.
Mm-hmm.
And really, you're receiving the Father who sent me. So by our act of receiving and welcoming and showing hospitality to someone that Jesus has sent is, in fact, a reflection of your own posture towards God himself. And then he goes on to say, even giving a cup of cold water to one of my people is something that is noteworthy and commendable. Something simple as basic, would you like something to drink?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this extravagant, over-the-top kind of gesture. So, and then we see it in Acts as well. I mean, you can make the case that hospitality was absolutely fundamental to the advancement of the gospel in the book of Acts.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the clearest examples is, of course, in Philippi, when you have Lydia, upon being converted, welcomes Paul and his team into her home and says, stay here. Make this your base of operations, essentially, as you continue to share the gospel in Philippi.
Yeah.
And so, as a side note, when I teach on this, I like to mention here to say, this shows you that the expectation was not that every wealthy believer upon conversion sells everything they have. That wasn't the expectation.
Yeah.
The expectation is that that person uses their wealth and their resources to advance the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular case, Lydia does more to advance the gospel by housing these individuals, and probably, she's feeding them, she's caring for them, and probably at some level potentially even making connections for them. That's in one sense more valuable than her being like, all right, I'm selling everything, here's a lump sum. that there's a value to leveraging wealth for the advance of the gospel there. And then in the epistles, I always like to point people to Romans 15 as sort of the underlying principle behind what hospitality looks like. And so I think I'll go ahead and pull that up here. Romans 15, just worth reading that. It's so good. And I think it's one of those things that people are familiar with, and they'll go, oh, wait a minute. I guess I didn't necessarily think of that in terms of hospitality.
15:5-7, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. May the God of endurance and encouragement grant you to live in such harmony with one another, in accord with Christ Jesus, that together you may with one voice glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. Right? I mean, right there it is. That's the principle that underlies hospitality.
So, if I understand you correctly, hospitality is a picture of the gospel.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like Christ welcomes us in the gospel, into his family, through those things, and we are supposed to do the same thing to others, like basically treating them as members of our family.
Yes.
Probably better than members of our family.
Sure. And to think about in what state were we when Christ did that?
Sure.
We were his enemies. So he was welcoming us when we were his enemies. And so I think that helps us to think through some of the perspectives on hospitality. There's a lot more we could talk about.
Yeah.
But
do you want to do a second episode on hospitality?
No.
Okay. Any?
I want to give my
practical?
key takeaways.
Okay.
And then we can, if you're going to talk practical, we can. So these are my 4 key takeaways when I taught on this. Number 1, hospitality originates in the gospel. It is rooted in Christ welcoming us through the gospel. So hospitality originates in the gospel. Number 2, hospitality expresses the gospel. It's an outward expression of our love for God. Number 3, hospitality advances the gospel. It is central to the people growing in it and extending its reach. So in other words, it's not just an evangelistic technique. It's not just a discipleship technique. It is a both and.
Yeah.
And then 4th, hospitality requires the gospel. In our own strength, we cannot live this out. You mentioned earlier that that Kate and I do this a lot, and we try, and we're far from perfect models of it, but it's still stretching. It still takes an intentional effort. It's not like, oh, yeah, of course. Often, sometimes it is. Other times it's, okay, I'm going to choose to do this.
Yeah.
Because I know this is right. It honors the Lord, and this will be a blessing. But it takes gospel-empowered effort to do it sometimes. Because it can be costly, or it can be inconvenient, or especially if you're like me and I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I like my space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be a bit of a challenge. Do you have any practical thoughts on hospitality that you wanted to get in here before we?
I mean, when I said practical, I meant your takeaways. But I would just say, don't wait for things to be perfect to start showing hospitality. Mm-hmm. You can do this imperfectly with a little, you mentioned the passage about the cup of water. Yeah. You can invite people over to your house, apartment, dorm room, whatever, and just engage with people around you.
And it doesn't have to be even in your own home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can get together for coffee with somebody at a coffee shop and still make them feel welcome, still make them feel encouraged and blessed to be there. And I would also say it's important to distinguish hospitality from entertainment.
Yeah.
When you entertain someone, the focus is really ultimately, I think, sort of external. Like, I want you to be impressed with my house, or I want you to have fun. There's nothing wrong with having people in your home and them having fun. Mm-hmm. But hospitality has a larger goal, I would say, of being a blessing to someone through encouragement, through providing for their needs, through just, again, making them feel welcome and part of your family for that moment.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to distinguish it. Because if your focus is entertainment, you're going to get hung up potentially on well, my house isn't perfectly clean. Or we're still kind of in the middle of this renovation project in this one bedroom, and I'd be embarrassed for anybody to see it.
Yeah.
Like those kinds of things are barriers to hospitality that I think that's not hospitality anymore than oftentimes.
Now, I will say there is something about hospitality in which you do want things to be nice for your guest,
Of course,
right?
of
Like
course.
having filth and grime everywhere is not how
Correct.
to there's a both and to that.
Yeah, there's an aspect of done well. You're showing honor to this person, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
look, it's sort of we want you to feel welcome, and we are making every effort possible so that this is a good experience for you. It's a pretty place for you to be in and to enjoy, that sort of thing. But it can certainly be something that people get hung up on. So anyway, much more could be said, but
We're ready to press on.
we are. Time now for This Day in Sports History.
All right, February the 4th, 2025. That's where we're at right now.
That's right.
That's wild.
1/7 of the way through February.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
It feels
February
like
goes quick.
It does. It helps that it's short. 1924, Jacob Tullen Thames of Norway wins ski jumping gold at the first ever Winter Olympic Games in, Chamonix, France. I pronounced that incorrectly. In 1936, he earned silver medal at the Berlin Summer Olympics
Yeah.
in sailing.
There can't be too many guys who've medaled in both Olympics.
That'd be a fun look.
Yeah.
He's probably the first.
Well, that was the very first Winter Olympics in 1924.
Yeah.
So had to be the first, probably. Right?
1972, Dutch speed skater.
Don't you love state? Don't you?
I hate those three words are Ard Schenk
Yep.
wins the 5,000 meter at the Sapporo Winter Olympics. I didn't realize that pizza company hosted
Apparently.
the Olympics. Also wins the 1,500 meter and the 10,000 meter gold medals.
I believe we have mentioned Ard Schenk before on the program.
Have we?
I believe so. I don't know that we named it.
Huh.
I don't know that he made the show title.
Well, maybe his time has come.
Maybe.
1990. Oh boy. Do you know how to pronounce this one?
I'd be guessing.
Okay. Lyudmila. Okay, that was the easy part. Okay.
Right.
Narzelenko.
Narazelenko would be my guess.
Narazelenko. That's basically what I said. Runs world record 60-meter hurdles indoors in, is that 7.96 seconds?
7.69 seconds. Yeah.
Wow. That's
fast.
That's a quick 60 meters.
Yeah.
We're certainly not picking her. 2007 Super Bowl XLI. That's oh my goodness, 41.
Yes, correct. Good job.
Dolphin Stadium, the Miami Gardens, Miami, Florida. Indianapolis Colts beat the Chicago Bears 29-17. I remember that game.
Yep.
It was pouring rain.
It was.
It was a damp Super Bowl.
Yes.
Peyton Manning MVP.
Do you remember who the quarterback for the Bears was at that point?
It was Rex Grossman.
Yes. Well done.
Rex
Sexy Rexy.
Rex Grossman.
Was his nickname.
Somehow he gets left out of the Bears haven't had a quarterback since 1985. I'm like, Rex Grossman took you to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He threw him out like trash. 2019, Caitlin Clark scores 60 points in a game for Dowling Catholic High School against Mason City High School, setting the second highest single game point total in Iowa for 5-on-5 girls basketball. I suppose they do 3-on-3 for girls basketball.
They must. I mean, I know in Nebraska they do 7-on-7 football in certain areas because they
Really?
just don't have.
They don't have enough people to field a team.
Yeah.
Yet they seem to produce offensive linemen as well.
Those are big farm boys.
Yeah. Anyway, who do you like?
I mean, I'd probably go Caitlin Clark or Ard Schenk.
I'm for Ard.
Yeah.
Ard Schenk.
Ard Schenk. Ugh. Our first Dutch speed skater makes the platform.
Yeah.
Or the podium, I should say. Okay. All right. One thing you liked.
All right. So I think I mentioned Severance last week as
You
a
did.
show my wife and I are watching.
You did.
We are caught up on that now,
Okay.
and we have started a second show
Okay.
on Apple TV Plus called Silo.
Okay, give me the synopsis here.
Okay, so sci-fi,
Okay.
post-apocalyptic, and to survive, humanity has burrowed this silo something like 150 large levels or more underground.
All right.
And they have all of society sort of in the silo because it's a nuclear wasteland on the outside and has poisonous air.
All right.
And they have farmland underneath on one of the levels. They have, all these things.
Okay.
And it's about the politics. It's about, there's some doubt as to whether the outside is good or, clean enough for them to go out there.
Yeah.
And so if somebody says, I want to go outside, they send them out with like a spacesuit on, and they are to go out there and they are supposed to clean the camera. And there's this big camera, or there's a camera that is shoots the outside, and it displays 24/7 in the cafeteria. And so all you see is this dead tree and this rock, and these people go out there and they wipe it clean, and they walk away, and they die on camera. And you just sort of –
So it's so toxic that even these suits don't protect them.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so but you have people being like, well, that's not real, or this is the manufactured, or all these things. And there's only about 10 to 12,000 people in the silo. So it's but yeah, it's awesome. It's
So small town politics intensified, basically.
oh yeah. And so it's based on a book series called I believe it's called Wool. Wool for cleaning off the camera.
Yeah.
Is I believe the first one's called Wool, the second one's called Shift, and the third one's called Dust. And it's a trilogy. And they finished season 2 of that, and they have signed them up for 3 and 4 already.
All right. Wow. Okay.
Very, very good. Very,
Nice.
very good.
Okay. I'm going to go with this past weekend. My lovely bride had a birthday. And so it was fun to celebrate that. Both my boys came over, as well as Jake's wife Autumn joined us as well. The lovely, I used to say her last name, but now it's Autumn Harmon.
Yeah.
Love it.
Did she move her maiden name to the middle name?
No.
Okay.
No.
I know that's a thing.
It is a thing.
I know very few people who have done it.
Same here, yes. I think it's more common in the South.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah, because we had a friend of Kate's who made something for her, and she referred to her as like it was like monographed or something, and it was like Kate Hudson Harmon, as if her maiden name had replaced her middle name. And it's like, well, no, that's
I know some people do it on Facebook only.
right to make it
be
more
identified.
findable. Yeah. Anyway. So we went to the Grace game together, a nice win over Spring Arbor. And in addition to family, we had our friends, the Cornells, came down. So he is a professor up at Spring Arbor. His wife is the athletic administrative assistant. So kind of the equivalent of our Kelly Sharp.
Who they honored at
Who they
halftime.
honored today at that game.
Was there a lot of commentary about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kelly Sharp, she knows our friend Lori,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so she actually got her a bobblehead.
Oh,
so there's going to be a
nice.
Kelly Sharp bobblehead
love
on
it.
display in the Spring Arbor Athletic Office.
I love it. That's great.
But it's just great to have them together. We played.
So did they buy dinner afterward because Grace won that game? Or
Should have put money on it. Yeah. Sadly,
I mean, not
we
money
didn't.
on it. Yeah, buy dinner. It's hospitality.
Yeah, exactly. But no, we had dinner back at the house, and then we played games.
Nice.
So played some Swoop, played some Werewords. You ever play Werewords?
Never played Swoop either.
Well, we will have to teach you some.
We've been into Wavelength recently.
Yeah.
And
Our kids played that at Christmas.
That's a wild time. We did that with our small group on Friday.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Gotcha.
Community group. Sorry, Mark.
There you go. It's still a life group in my mind.
Yeah, I just called it a small group. I don't know. Who am I?
I know.
But anyway.
Who are either of us, right?
I
don't know.
Nobody's.
So that is my one thing I liked. All right, John, we have talked about the NBA and a blockbuster trade. We have talked about hospitality. We have talked about Ard Schenk.
Ard Schenk.
We've talked about Silo. And we've celebrated my wife's birthday.
Nice.
So I think, by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.